Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, a grim milestone. Israel marks 500 days of war, while the first U.S. congressional delegation visits Israel since Donald Trump became president. Analysis from the Pulse of Israel's Avi Abelow and from Itamar Marcus from Palestinian Media Watch. Plus, coming home, how some Israelis in the north are returning to their kibbutzes and rebuilding their lives. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. 500 days of war. This week, Israel marked the milestone of how long it's been since the October 7th invasion by Hamas. This week also includes the first U.S. congressional visit since Donald Trump became president. Here's the latest on those items and more. Sunday's meeting revealed the new U.S. administration and Israel's prime minister are on the same page that Hamas must be destroyed.
Hamas cannot continue as a military or government force. And frankly, as long as it stands as a force that can govern or as a force that can administer or as a force that can threaten by use of violence, peace becomes impossible. They must be eliminated. It must be eradicated.
Netanyahu again backed President Trump's plan to help Gazans leave the devastated territory while others rebuild it under U.S. control. He says many Palestinians want to leave, but Hamas won't let them.
Everybody says this is the largest open-air prison in the world. Not because of us. We tried to get the population to leave, to get them out of harm's way, and Hamas, with rifles, with gunfire, tried to prevent them from leaving.
Netanyahu also said he and the Trump administration see eye to eye on the threat from Iran.
Israel and America stand shoulder to shoulder in countering the threat of Iran. We agreed that the Ayatollahs must not have nuclear weapons.
Behind everything that threatens peace and stability for the millions of people who call this region home is Iran.
After several days of threatening not to free any more hostages, Hamas relented and released 3 Saturday, an American Israeli, a Russian Israeli, and an Argentinian Israeli. All 3 were put through the humiliating process of being paraded past jeering Gazans. Then it was off to Israel, freedom, and the arms of loved ones.
After 498 days in Hamas captivity, he is here, right above us in the hospital, standing on his feet with a huge smile and joy in his heart.
Last week, Trump demanded all remaining hostages be freed by Saturday, but he says he's leaving the matter in Israel's hands.
I told Bibi, you do whatever you want. That'll be up to Israel what the next step is, in consultation with me.
Netanyahu says he's working closely with Trump on getting the hostages freed, but some details must be kept secret.
Including when the gates of hell will be opened, as they surely will, if all our hostages are not released until the last one of them.
There is absolutely no way that the Trump administration will not see this through.
Now negotiating teams begin laying the groundwork for Phase 2 of the ceasefire.
Phase 2 contemplates an end of the war, but it also contemplates Hamas not being involved in the government and being gone from Gaza. So we've got to square those two things.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said the Trump administration can try economic and diplomatic means to force Iran to abandon its nuclear goals, or the U.S. can end that threat permanently.
A military path where we help Israel deliver a decisive blow against Iran's nuclear infrastructure, I prefer that path.
Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar warned the U.S. lawmakers Iran's only way to maintain power in the region is to acquire nukes. He wrote on X, Iran seeks to compensate for its weakened position by obtaining nuclear weapons. It must be stopped. This first congressional delegation to visit Israel since President Trump took office showed tepid approval of his plan to empty Gaza and have the U.S. assume control. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu backs the Trump plan, but Graham says Palestinians shouldn't be forced to leave.
I will work with Israel to find countries that would host Palestinians if they choose to leave. But we're not talking about a force exodus.
Israel believes many Gazans will want to get out as they see the utter decimation of their homes and neighborhoods.
Everything is destroyed. Nothing is left in Gaza. Gaza is not fit for life.
Netanyahu also says he won't accept the transfer of power in Gaza from Hamas to the Palestinian Authority. Many believe the PA shares the same goals as Hamas.
They only exist in order to kill us. And there's no difference between the Islamo-Nazis called Hamas and the Islamo-Nazis called Palestinian Authority.
The uneasy ceasefire with Hamas is holding, with the terror group set to hand over the bodies of 4 murdered hostages on Thursday. Reports are now saying Hamas may release the 6 remaining live hostages, due to be freed in phase 1 of the deal this Saturday instead of over the next 2 weeks. Hostage relatives like Eli David are campaigning hard to make sure there's a phase 2 when his brother would hopefully be freed from the horrors Hamas has inflicted on its captives for more than 500 days.
It's so long that these people, my brother included, are suffering. They have not enough food. They have no sunlight, they are kept underground, and they are being through torture.
In the north, Israeli troops are pulling out of southern Lebanon as agreed to in the ceasefire deal. But Israel is planning to keep troops in 5 strategic outposts in Lebanon with U.S. approval. It's also tripling the number of troops on the Israeli side of that border. The IDF says if it looks like the ceasefire is holding, it hopes the tens of thousands of Israelis who evacuated the border area will come back starting March 2nd. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, marking the days, looking back at 16 months of a war Israel didn't start. Well, today marks 500 days since October 7th, and to mark that, the Jerusalem Post had this front page headline in a banner headline, 500 days, and then a yellow ribbon with the names of all the 251 hostages that were taken on October 7th. A very somber day, milestone here in Israel. And to join me to talk about this is Avi Abelow from the Pulse of Israel. Avi, thanks for joining us. First of all, tell us what you're thinking about the hostages, the way they're released, the kind of propaganda, the staging that Hamas does to release the hostages week by week, and what kind of toll that puts on Israel.
Well, first of all, as we still have hostages still in Gaza, and we hope to get all out as soon as possible, it is always heartwarming to see those that are freed and come back to real life, to their families. It's sad. It's sad to see the staging, the production, the psychological manipulation that Hamas does by their presentations, ceremonies, releasing, giving them gift bags, signing documents, you're now free, or whatever it is. It's not sad that they're doing it. It's despicable, it's evil that they're doing it. Here are people that massacred, mutilated, mass raped women, babies, grandmothers, kidnapped. What's sad is that the world has given into their psychological manipulation, that Israelis have given into that psychological manipulation, and they are experts at it. They've been doing it for not just for 16 months, they've been doing it for decades. This is not the first time that we've had Israelis kidnapped by what I call our Islamo-Nazi enemies. It's not just Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other groups, and they're always manipulating us in order to force Israeli society to do what no other society would do. Basically be able to give up almost any price in order to free our hostages. But I want to mention an important point here that doesn't get mentioned enough. We're all very happy that President Trump gave his ultimatum. If they're not all freed by Saturday, all hell will be released, right? So it didn't happen. All right, the government of Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu didn't move forward on that ultimatum. But President Trump made that ultimatum. What isn't being discussed enough is how there was 15 months of a Biden administration that never made that ultimatum. That ultimatum should have been made on October 8th. If not on October 8th, then on October 9th. Not on October 10th. 15 months. The leader of the free world never made an ultimatum that our Islamo-Nazi enemies, that again, it's not just Hamas, they're just a proxy of Iran and Qatar and other Shiite, Sunni, Muslim terrorists, Islamic terrorists, and they're just a proxy. America, the Biden administration had all the leverage in the world to give such an ultimatum 16 months ago, and it didn't.
Yeah.
And instead, what we're seeing every day, thanks to Elon Musk's work with Doge and the investigation of the funding of the waste of US taxpayer money, is that the Biden administration was literally funding Hamas before October 7th and even after October 7th. And money that didn't just go to Hamas, money that went to the Palestinian Authority, that besides the Palestinian Authority's own support for terror, $97 million of that money was given to the terrorists who committed the October 7th tragedies and their families. We're talking about a level of evil where, for putting aside the psychological manipulation of our Islamo-Nazi enemy in Gaza, they were allowed to get away with it. They were empowered. They were funded by U.S. taxpayer money to do so. And that's not getting enough press.
Yeah, and I know another thing that a lot of people didn't think got enough press was the fact that of the 251, there were a number of Americans.
7, if I'm not mistaken.
In as hostages, and a number killed on October 7th. And that never seemed to be in either the administration's eyesight or even U.S. media. Up next, a social welfare program that makes Hamas terrorists wealthy while they're held in Israeli prisons. Palestinian Media Watch has shined a light for almost 3 decades on what's being broadcast and written by Palestinians. Governments and decision makers worldwide reference its work. Here's an excerpt from a recent YouTube live broadcast we did with PMW's founder and director, Itamar Marcus. Thanks for joining us. You know, the attention of the world is really here on Israel and especially in Gaza, what's happening there with the hostage release, the prisoners release, and also what the Palestinian Authority is saying on their official media. Joining me now to talk about this is Itamar Marcus. He's the founder of the Palestinian Media Watch. Itamar, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For those that may not know it, what is pay to slay?
Pay to slay is that under Palestinian Authority law, every terrorist who, and I say terrorist, every terrorist who's arrested and goes to jail in Israel starts getting a salary right away. From the first day they're arrested, they start at 1,400 shekel a month, and then the longer they're in jail, the salary keeps going up, eventually getting as high as 12,000 shekels a month. Now, this is been called pay for slay because literally that's what it is. We're talking about people. Take, for example, Abdallah Barghouti. He built bombs for Hamas. His bombs killed 67 Israelis. He has already received over $300,000 from the Palestinian Authority in salary rewards for going to jail. Now, if someone's a suicide bomber, they can't receive the money, so the family receives the money. The family receives 1,400 shekel every month for life. So if he has a young child and he's a terrorist, that child will be receiving for 70 years 1,400 shekel. And I might point out that this would absolutely not be possible without Western funding. The Western governments initially were literally paying for this directly because they were putting the money straight into the Palestinian Authority account. Subsequently, they said, okay, you know what? We're not going to pay for this directly. We're going to pay for the schools. We're going to pay for buildings. We're going to pay for sewage. And that will leave the Palestinian Authority with money to take care of their terrorists. So it's an outrage. Money is fungible. And the West should be absolutely embarrassed and shamed for doing this unethical behavior of funding a Palestinian Authority that supports terror.
As part of the hostage release and ceasefire, there's been hundreds of Palestinian prisoners that have been released. You have documented how much money they actually have received over time. What are those figures?
So it's just crazy. They've received, the ones who are just getting out of this deal, which is a little over 700, they've received over $500 million shekel. 316 of them are leaving prison as millionaires. Over $1 million shekel. One of them actually over 2 million shekel because they've been in prison long enough and accumulated. Altogether, in dollars, it comes to about, $140 million being given out just to these 700 terrorist prisoners. And of course, this makes these people, they go into their cities, they go into their villages, and everybody sees how wealthy they are. They build fancy homes, they drive around in fancy cars. They say, wow, look at that person, look how wealthy. I mean, these salaries are so high, they're like 4 times the average Palestinian salary. By the way, the terrorists who get out of jail continue, under Palestinian law, continue to get the same high salary. So what happens is they become seen, and this is also one of the great terror motivators. People see these wealthy people roaming around. They can buy anything they want. They can do whatever they want. And everyone says, and children look at them and teenagers say, wow, I want to be like them. All I have to do is kill an Israeli, go to jail, get out into prison or release. So this whole system is an absolute terror incentivizer. And that's why it has to be stopped. And that's also why the Palestinian Authority hasn't stopped it, because they are very much interested in incentivizing terror.
Yeah. Can you talk about that too? And in terms of a millionaire, we're talking about millionaire in shekels, not dollars, correct?
Correct. These are million in shekels. It got they've received up to, I think, $650,000, which is an enormous amount of money they're leaving jail with. And again, by Palestinian Authority terms, when you realize that the average salary in the Palestinian Authority is in the area of $1,000 a month, it's $12,000 a year. You're talking about leaving with $600,000. That goes a tremendous distance. And like I say, they are the wealthiest people in Palestinian society.
Still ahead, reclaiming normalcy. How some Israelis in the north are returning to their homes. For now, some residents of northern Israel are returning to their homes. It's staying quiet despite concerns that the current ceasefire in Lebanon could break down. CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stoll visited one couple in a border community to hear how the war has changed their lives.
Although Barry and Orit Prague live in the north, they quickly felt the impact of the October 7th invasion because her beloved nephew and soldier died fighting Hamas. Born and raised here, Orit tells CBN News she never felt so insecure.
Because we have started hearing the stories from the Gaza Strip, I told Barry I want to go. So in that evening, on the 8th, which was Sunday, we packed a small trolley and we went to parents of my daughter-in-law.
Kibbutz Daphne was founded in 1939, nearly 10 years before the State of Israel. And despite all of Israel's wars, it was never fully evacuated until after the October 7th war began.
The anxiety or fear, if you like, of what happened in the Gaza Strip permeated all the way up here, and people thought that the same thing was going to happen from Lebanon, from the Hezbollah.
The Pragues became like wandering Jews living out of their suitcases.
We tried to see how we find the good or the strength in a situation.
We became part of the surreal situation, and we gradually adapted, as everybody else did, to this surreal situation which the people in the north and the south became accustomed to. And it's awful to think that we did become accustomed to, well, I can only describe it as crazy.
Soon after the war began, CBN News visited Kibbutz Daphne, an agricultural community and tourist destination. Community manager Arik Yacobi explained how the community maintained an emergency routine with just a few people milking cows and taking care of the animals. The hotel and camping area were closed, and Hezbollah rocket threats kept them out of their avocado orchards.
during some of the fighting in Lebanon for this place and here, there were a lot of casualties amongst our soldiers.
This area of the kibbutz suffered the most rocket damage. Barry says he hopes the residents here will all return.
So this house was damaged by a rocket that landed right in front of it, and the other houses around it were also damaged by shrapnel, broke windows, destroyed all sorts of stuff inside. Just now we're starting to get back to normal.
Barry and Orit returned last summer in the midst of the fighting.
We see our home is here. And coming back to Daphne, to our home, is sort of a statement, a declaration, A, to the Israeli government, B, to our friends and brothers and sisters in Daphne. We do trust the army. We saw that they were very good. They protected us very well.
Orit's Lithuanian parents helped start the kibbutz, and she felt childlike excitement coming back home.
When we came in June, what Barry said about the surreal feelings going in Daphne, that was in the highest of the prosperity of the kibbutz, until the 6th of October, was very weird.
The surreal part is that we were here in 2006. We stayed here. No one left. Oh, people left, but there was no evacuation. And if you remember the Lebanese war in 2006, there were lots of bombs and artillery and whatever, and there was no Iron Dome. There was nothing like that.
This time they saw a major difference.
Now this time there's artillery, and it was all around us. It was firing every so often. You never knew when. So all of a sudden you'd hear boom, boom. And at night, you'd also hear all of a sudden boom. You know, it was like from here to there. But after a while, we didn't wake up. But it's terrible to get used to something like that. That we don't want to be used to that. We want peace and quiet.
About 250 members have now returned. Volunteers are cleaning, painting, and preparing for more residents to come home. Agriculture is flourishing again, with other industries operating as they did throughout the war. One kindergarten has reopened, and in the coming months, they expect students to return to the high school. Orit is optimistic, saying it's amazing how humans can leave the past and move forward.
What we went here in those months, it was like we were sitting next to cannons bombs all day, and I was afraid to walk in a kibbutz because something would fall on me, and I forgot about it. And I sees the future as a place to live here and to go back to prosperity that Daphne used to have.
While Barry believes there are tough times ahead with the economy, he has hope.
And they founded this kibbutz in 1939, and they built it from nothing, and it was all a swamp and God knows what here. So I just feel that we're going to carry on, and our kids will carry on, and we've got to be optimistic and hope for the best.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Kibbutz Daphne, Northern Israel.
What an encouraging story. And that's typical of the kind of spirit you find in so many Israeli families right now. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. And please keep praying for Israel in this critical moment, for the peace of Jerusalem, that the Lord would protect his people and thwart the plans of all who want to destroy the apple of his eye. I'm Chris Mitchell. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.